The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber pulsed with ethereal light as laughter echoed through its vast space. Not pleasant laughter, the cruel, cutting kind that makes your skin crawl. Ambassador Zex Thara of the Vorthak Empire slapped her four-armed torso, her serpentine neck writhing with amusement. "Did you hear the latest human tale?" she hissed, her voice dripping with mockery. "They claim their ancestors once fought beings made of pure shadow." The council chamber erupted in renewed laughter. Beings from across the galaxy, the crystalline, Zephone, the energy-wreathed luminals, the insectoid clactors, all joined in ridiculing humanity's newest addition to their cultural database. High Counselor Vrex, a towering being of living metal, gestured with his massive arms. "These humans," he said, his voice like grinding gears, "they have such vivid imaginations. Dragons that breathe fire, warriors who can split mountains with their bare hands, gods walking among mortals." His optical sensors flashed with derision. "What's next? Magic?" Commander Saracen sat rigid in the human delegation section, her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb shifted uncomfortably, his weathered face flushed with embarrassment. They were Earth's first ambassadors to the Galactic community, and this wasn't going how they'd hoped. "Perhaps," Sarah said, standing slowly, "you shouldn't be so quick to dismiss what you don't understand." The laughter died instantly. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her, some curious, others hostile. Zexathara's forked tongue flicked out mockingly. "Oh? Are you going to tell us these fairy tales are real, little human?" Sarah's hands trembled, not with fear, but with barely contained rage. "Our legends aren't fairy tales, they're warnings." "Warnings?" Vrex's laugh sounded like metal scraping stone. "From what? Your imaginary monsters?" Dr. Webb stood beside Sarah, his voice steady despite the hostile crowd. "Every culture has stories, Counselor. Usually, they're based on something real." "Real?" The Zephone representative's crystalline form chimed with amusement. "Show us your dragons, then. Where are your gods now?" Sarah was about to respond when the chamber's light suddenly dimmed. A new presence entered, ancient, tired, and radiating an energy that made even the most arrogant council members shift nervously. The being that appeared was unlike anything they'd seen. Humanoid but translucent, as if made of starlight and shadow. Its voice when it spoke was barely a whisper, yet it filled the entire chamber. They're all true." Chapter 2. The ancient warning, the council chamber fell into absolute silence. Even the constant hum of the station's life support system seemed to hold its breath. The ancient being flickered, its form struggling to maintain cohesion. It was clearly using the last of its strength to be here. Who are you?" Vrex demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier arrogance. Was Keeper Noxhigh of the Eternal Archive." The being's voice was like wind through dead leaves. "I have watched for 10,000 cycles, waiting for this moment." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What moment?" The Keeper's gaze fixed on her, and she saw eons of weariness in those star-bright eyes. The moment when humanity would join the galactic community. The moment when the final seal would weaken. "Seal?" Dr. Webb stepped forward. "What seal?" Instead of answering directly, Keeper Noxhigh gestured weakly and holographic images began to appear throughout the chamber. Ancient battles, creatures of nightmare and legend. And humans, but not the humans the aliens knew. These humans blazed with power, wielding weapons of pure energy, standing toe-to-toe with beings that defied physics. "Your ancestors," the Keeper whispered to Sarah and Marcus, "were not primitive. They were guardians. Earth was not their home, it was their prison." The images shifted, showing a massive battle across multiple star systems. Dragons the size of planets breathed cosmic fire. Warriors leaped between moons, their fists shattering. Asteroids, gods walked among mortals, their very presence bending reality. "The War of Echoes," Noxhigh continued. "When the Old Ones tried to return from the spaces between dimensions, your species stood against them. You paid the ultimate price." Zexathara hissed in disbelief. This is impossible. Humans are weak. They barely achieved spaceflight. The keeper's laugh was hollow. Weak? You fools. They aren't weak. They're contained, bound by laws they placed upon themselves to keep the greater darkness at bay. More images appeared. Humans working with beings of incredible power, creating something. A massive construct that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The Genesis Lock, Knox High said. A prison built from human sacrifice. They bound their own potential, their own power, to create a cage that would hold the old ones forever. But the lock required a key. The images showed Earth, but not the Earth anyone recognized. This was a world of crystal cities and floating mountains where humans soared through the sky on wings of pure light. They made themselves forget, the keeper continued, reduced themselves to children playing in the dirt, telling stories of the glory they once knew. Your myths, your legends, their genetic memories, echoes of what you truly are. Sarah's mind reeled. That's impossible. Is it? The keeper's form was growing fainter. Tell me, human child, why does your species create stories of heroes who can punch gods? Why do you dream of flying, of wielding power beyond measure? Why do your fictional warriors look just like the guardians I remember? Dr. Webb's scientific mind struggled with the implications. But evolution, genetics, our fossil record, carefully constructed, Knox High whispered. A living lie, told so well that even you believed it. The perfect disguise. Vrex slammed his metal fist against his throne. Even if this ridiculous story were true, what does it matter now? The humans are what they are. Weak, limited creatures who barely understand their own technology. The keeper's eyes blazed with sudden intensity. Because the lock is failing. It was designed to last until humanity was ready to remember. Until they rejoined the galactic community. The chamber erupted in chaos, aliens shouting, demanding explanations, calling for proof. But Sarah barely heard them. She was staring at the fading images, at the warriors who looked so much like the heroes from Earth's movies and comics. How long? She asked quietly, but somehow the keeper heard her over the din. Days, perhaps hours. The signs are already beginning. What signs? Before the keeper could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red. A Clactor technician burst through the chamber, doors, its mandibles clicking frantically. High Counselor, we're detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the galaxy. Reality itself is tearing. The keeper smiled sadly. It begins. The old ones stir in their prison. And your species, he looked at Sarah with something like hope. Your species must remember what they are, before it's too late. His form began to dissolve completely. Find the awakening protocols. Find the truth of what you were. Find it before the nightmares of 10,000 years return to claim everything you've forgotten you're capable of protecting. With that, Keeper Knox High vanished, leaving behind only the echo of his final words. The dragons were real. The gods walked among you, and you are their children. Chapter 3. The Awakening. The council chamber descended into chaos as reality itself seemed to hiccup around them. Spatial distortions rippled through the air like heat waves, and several alien delegates flickered in and out of existence. Sarah grabbed Dr. Webb's arm as the floor beneath them shimmered. Marcus, are you seeing this? Seeing it? I'm analyzing. It. Webb frantically worked his handheld scanner, its readings jumping wildly. These aren't just spatial distortions, Sarah. It's like the fundamental laws of physics are being rewritten in real time. High Counselor Vrex was shouting orders, but his voice kept distorting, sometimes sounding like grinding metal, other times like the roar of a distant storm. All stations, report your status. What are these readings? A luminal delegate, her energy form usually stable and bright, was flickering like a dying star. Counselor, our deep space sensors are detecting impossible things, structures appearing in empty space. Creatures the size of star systems moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Ambassador Zexathara's serpentine form writhed in apparent pain. My telepathic network is going insane. I'm receiving thoughts from things that were never alive. Ancient minds full of hunger and rage. Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, a warmth that was growing stronger by the second. She looked at her hands and gasped. Faint lines of golden light were tracing patterns beneath her skin, like circuitry made of starfire. "Marcus?" she whispered, her voice strange even to her own ears. "Look at yourself." Dr. Webb held up his hands and staggered backward. The same golden patterns were emerging on his skin, and his eyes were beginning to glow with an inner light. "What's happening to us?" Before Sarah could answer, the main viewing screen flickered to life, showing feeds from across the galaxy. What they saw made everyone fall silent. On a distant mining world, human colonists were floating in the air, their bodies surrounded by halos of crackling energy. They looked confused, terrified, but definitely airborne. On the trade station at Proxima Centauri, a human engineer was casually lifting a 50-ton cargo container with one hand, staring at it in bewilderment. On Earth itself, every human-made monument was beginning to glow. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Mount Rushmore, all pulsing with the same golden light that was now flowing through Sarah's veins. "The genetic locks," Sarah breathed, understanding flooding through her like a dam breaking. "They're failing." Vrex's optical sensors focused on the humans with new intensity. "What did you do? What is your species?" But Sarah wasn't listening to him anymore. She was listening to something else, a voice that seemed to come from inside, her own DNA. It spoke in a language she'd never learned but somehow understood perfectly. "Remember, you are the children of stars and void. You are the guardians who chose exile. You are the weapons that became shields. Remember." The golden light in her veins pulsed brighter, and suddenly Sarah could see through the lies. She could see the truth of what humanity had been, what they had sacrificed, what they truly were. "We weren't primitive," she said, her voice carrying a harmonic resonance that made the chamber's crystals sing. "We were gods who chose to become mortal." Dr. Webb was changing too. His elderly frame was straightening, his weathered face becoming ageless. The scientist in him was still working, but now he was processing information at speeds that should have been impossible. "The math," he said in wonder. "It all makes sense now. Humanity's rapid advancement, our intuitive understanding of physics we shouldn't comprehend yet, our ability to dream of technologies we haven't invented. We're not learning. We're remembering." The viewing screen showed more impossible sights. Human children on a dozen worlds were beginning to manifest abilities that defied every known law of science. Telekinesis, energy manipulation. Some were even beginning to phase in and out of visible reality. But the screens also showed something else. In the deep voids between galaxies, massive shapes were stirring, things that belonged to no known geometry, beings that existed in more dimensions than mortal minds could process. The old ones were waking up. Zexathara, her earlier mockery replaced by terror, slithered toward the humans. "If this is true, if your species really were guardians, then you must stop this. The things I'm sensing, they're beyond nightmare." Sarah turned to face the alien ambassador, and Zexathara recoiled from the power now blazing in the human's eyes. "We gave up everything to stop them once before. We made ourselves forget, made ourselves small and weak, all to maintain the prison that kept these things locked away." "Then do it again," Vrex demanded. "It doesn't work that way," Dr. Webb said, his voice now carrying the weight of eons. "The lock was always temporary. It was designed to last until humanity was ready to face the old ones as equals, not as gods forced to sacrifice themselves." The chamber shook as another reality distortion swept through it. This time, they could all see something in the distortion. A glimpse of writhing tentacles the size of solar systems, eyes like black holes, mouths that could swallow galaxies. "Then what do we do?" a Zophone delegate chimed desperately. Sarah stood up, and as she did, wings of pure energy unfurled from her shoulders. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. She looked like the mythological angels from Earth's oldest stories, if angels were made of starlight and cosmic fire. "We remember what we are," she said, her voice now carrying the authority of eons. "We take back our birthright, and we remind the old ones why they feared us in the first place." Dr. Webb nodded, his own transformation accelerating. "But first we need to find the other humans, all of them. Every single one scattered across the galaxy." "Why?" Vrex asked. Sarah's smile was both gentle and terrifying. "Because individually, we're just echoes of what we once were. But together—" She gestured, and the chamber's viewing screen changed, showing Earth as it truly was. Not a simple planet, but a complex dimensional construct, a key shaped like a world. Together, we are the Genesis lock. We are the weapon that the old ones could never break, because we are made of willing sacrifice and conscious choice. We are the children of legends who became legends ourselves. The alarms were getting louder. Reality was fraying at the edges, and somewhere in the deep dark between dimensions, ancient hungers were stirring. But for the first time since the crisis began, Sarah Chen, no longer quite human, not yet remembering how to be divine, felt hope. The war for existence itself was about to begin, and humanity was finally waking up. Chapter 4. The War of Remembrance. 3 days after the awakening began, the galaxy was no longer recognizable. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the hastily converted flagship, Phoenix Rising, watching as reality twisted itself into new configurations outside the viewport. What had once been empty space now crawled with things that hurt to look at directly. Geometric impossibilities that existed in too many dimensions. Creatures that were part living being and part abstract concept. "Status report," she called, out, her voice carrying effortlessly through the ship despite speaking normally. The awakening had changed her in ways she was still discovering. Captain Torres, a human naval officer, whose own transformation had given him the ability to perceive hyperspace directly, consulted his readings. "We've established contact with 73% of human colonies and outposts. The awakening is spreading, but it's not uniform. Some people are changing rapidly, others are showing resistance." Dr. Webb, now serving as their chief strategist, and looking decades younger than his actual age, nodded grimly. "It makes sense. The deeper the genetic locks were embedded, the harder they are to break, and some humans chose to lock themselves deeper than others." Sarah turned from the viewport. Around the bridge, the crew moved with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. Lieutenant Commander Jackson was piloting the ship through hyperspace, using nothing but his innate understanding of dimensional physics. Ensign Park was communicating with other vessels through what could only be described as technologically enhanced telepathy. They were becoming what they had always been meant to be, but it might not be enough. "What about the other species?" Sarah asked. "That's complicated," Webb replied, pulling up a holographic display. "The galactic community is in panic. Half of them think we're the threat now. The other half are begging us to save them from the old ones." The display showed the current state of known space. Red zones marked areas where reality had been compromised by the old one's influence. Blue zones indicated stable space still under conventional physics. But the red was spreading faster than the blue could adapt. "High Counselor Vrex has declared martial law across the core worlds," Torres continued. "But their weapons can't even touch these things. They're trying to evacuate entire star systems." Sarah studied the tactical display with eyes that could now perceive patterns across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "They're making a mistake. Running won't work. The old ones don't just consume space, they consume the concept of space. Eventually, there will be nowhere left to run to." "So what do we do?" asked Commander Rodriguez, whose awakening had granted her the ability to interface directly with any technology through touch. "Fight them head on?" "Not yet," Sarah said. "We're still remembering how. But we're going to have to learn fast." As if summoned by her words, The ship's proximity alarms began blaring. On the main viewer, space itself was tearing open like fabric, revealing something beyond that defied description. It was one of the old ones. Not a large one, barely the size of a moon, but its presence made everyone on the bridge stagger. Looking at it was like trying to understand a mathematical equation that solved itself by eating the calculator. "Evasive maneuvers," Torres called out. But Jackson was already moving, his hands dancing over controls that shouldn't have been able to navigate through folded spacetime. "Wait," Sarah said, holding up a hand. "Don't run. We need to test something." She closed her eyes and reached out with senses she was still learning to use. The old one's presence was like a cold fire against her consciousness, alien, hungry, and utterly indifferent to concepts like life or death. But there was something else. A familiar resonance like an echo of an echo. "This one remembers us," she said softly. "It was there during the First War." Sarah opened her eyes, and they were no longer quite the eyes of a mortal being. Golden light streamed from them as she reached out through dimensions that folded space like origami. The old one noticed her attention and turned its impossible geometry in her direction. When it spoke directly into the minds of everyone on the bridge in a voice like the heat death of universes. "Little guardians, you wake too late. We have grown strong in our prison. You are shadows of what you were." Sarah smiled, and her smile contained the light of newborn stars. "Are we?" She reached out with her consciousness and touched the memories embedded in humanity's genetic code, not just her own, but those of every human currently undergoing the awakening. Millions of minds, all remembering at once. And in that moment, the bridge of the Phoenix Rising was no longer on a ship in space. It was on the battlefield where gods had fought monsters at the dawn of creation itself. Sarah was no longer just Sarah Chen, former Earth ambassador. She was Sarah Thel the Starforge, one of the eternal guardians who had shaped reality with her will. Dr. Webb was not Marcus Webb, elderly scientist, but Markesh the Dimension Walker, architect of impossible spaces. Every human on the bridge was remembering their true names, their true natures, and the old one, faced with beings it had thought safely diminished, recoiled in what might have been surprise. Impossible. The binding was absolute. "The binding was willing," Sarah Sarathel replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that made space itself resonate. "We chose to forget, which means we can choose to remember." She gestured, and around the ship, space began to change. Not breaking like it did when the old ones touched it, but flowing, reshaping itself according to rules that existed before physics had been invented. The old one lashed out with tendrils of pure entropy, attacks that could unmake entire solar systems. But the humans were no longer where the attacks landed. They were stepping between dimensions, moving through spaces that existed in the gaps between seconds. "You are still mortal, still bound by form." "Yes," Sarah agreed, raising her hand. Light began to gather around her fingers, not the light of stars, but the light that stars were made from. "We learned that mortality has its own kind of strength, that choosing to be finite makes every choice matter more." She released the light, and it struck the old one like a spear thrown by a god. The creature screamed, a sound that shattered 3 nearby asteroids and sent ripples through hyperspace. But it did not die. Instead, it began to retreat, folding itself back through the tear in reality. "This is not ended, Guardians. We are legend, and you are still only human." The tear sealed itself, leaving the Phoenix Rising alone in normal space once again. For a moment, nobody spoke. The weight of recovered memory was staggering. Lifetimes upon lifetimes of experience, power beyond imagination, the responsibility of guarding all existence itself. "Well," Dr. Webb said finally, his voice shaky but determined, "that was educational." Sarah nodded, but she was troubled. The old one had been right about one thing. They were still human, still mortal. The awakening had restored their memories and abilities, but not their original forms. They were echoes of gods, not gods themselves. "Captain," she said, "open a channel to all human vessels. It's time to gather the tribe." "Yes, ma'am, what should I tell them?" Sarah looked out at the stars, seeing them now with eyes that remembered when they were young. "Tell them it's time to come home. All of us. Earth isn't just our birth world. It's the key to the lock that's been keeping reality safe. And if we're going to face what's coming, we need to turn that key together." As the message went out across the galaxy, Sarah felt the first stirrings of something that had been dormant for 10,000 years. Not just power, but purpose. Not just memory, but meaning. The old ones were awakening. But so were the guardians who had defeated them once before. And this time they would not need to sacrifice themselves to win. This time they would fight as what they had always been meant to be: human, mortal, finite, and therefore capable of choosing to be infinite when it mattered most. The real war was about to begin. Epilogue. The new dawn 6 months later, Earth no longer looked like the planet humanity had left behind. Sarah stood in what had once been the Nevada desert but was now a crystalline plain that stretched to the horizon. Structures of living light rose from the ground like abstract sculptures, each one a focal point for the dimensional energies that were slowly transforming not just Earth, but the entire solar system. The awakening was complete. Every human in the galaxy had either undergone the transformation or chosen to remain dormant, though even the dormant ones were changed, serving as anchor points that kept their awakened kin connected to their humanity. "The last of the refugee fleets arrived this morning," Dr. Webb reported, approaching across the crystal sand. His appearance had stabilized into something that was recognizably Marcus Webb, but perfected, as if someone had taken the idea of a wise scientist and made it manifest in flesh and energy. "How are the other species adapting?" Sarah asked. She had chosen to retain most of her human appearance, though her eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Better than expected. The Vorthak Empire has actually requested formal alliance status. Apparently Zexathara has become quite the advocate for human-alien cooperation. Sarah smiled. "And the Council?" "Disbanded and reformed as the Consensus of Worlds. Vrex insisted on making the humans permanent mediators. I think he's still a bit afraid of us." "He should be," Sarah said, but there was no malice in it. "We're no longer the species that needed protection. We're the species that provides it." She gestured toward the sky, where the aurora-like streams of energy were visible even in daylight. Each stream connected Earth to other worlds, other dimensions, creating a network of stability that was slowly pushing back the chaos the old ones had brought. "Speaking of which, how goes the war?" Webb's expression grew serious. "We've contained 17 breaches in the last month. The old ones are testing our defenses constantly, but they can't make significant progress. The Genesis lock isn't just repaired, it's stronger than it was before. Because we remember what we're protecting now." Sarah nodded. "Before, we were gods fighting to preserve abstract concepts. Now we're humans fighting to protect our friends." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as a group of human children played nearby. These children had been born after the awakening, and they moved through space and time as easily as they moved through air. One of them was casually juggling small black holes, while another was having a conversation with what appeared to be a sentient equation. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Webb asked. "Staying human, I mean. We could have fully restored ourselves, become the gods we once were." Sarah considered the question. "Watch them," she said, indicating the children. The old guardians were powerful, but they were also distant, removed from the things they protected. These children know what it's like to be mortal. They've experienced loss, joy, fear, hope. When they grow up to be our successors, they'll guard the universe not out of duty, but out of love. A chime from Sarah's communication device interrupted her thoughts. She activated it, and a holographic display showed a tactical map of local space. "What is it, Commander Rodriguez?" "We've got a situation at the edge of the system. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly despite the light years of distance. Long-range sensors are picking up something big. Really big. Sarah and Webb exchanged glances. Old one? Unknown. It's approaching slowly, but it's massive. Easily the size of Jupiter, and it's broadcasting. Broadcasting what? That's the weird part. It's broadcasting a message in ancient human, the language we used before the binding. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. Put it through. The message, when it came, was in a voice that spoke with the authority of eons. Guardians of the third configuration. I am Volthera, the architect, first of the old ones, eldest of the deep. I come not to wage war, but to parley. The prison you built has served its purpose. We have learned much in our confinement, as have you, I perceive. Perhaps it is time to discuss a new arrangement, one that does not require the sacrifice of either of our species. Sarah looked at Webb, who shrugged. Well, that's unexpected. Yeah, Sarah agreed, but not unwelcome. Open a channel to all human command vessels. It looks like we're about to make first contact with our oldest enemies. And if it's a trap? Sarah's smile was gentle but carried the weight of stellar fire. Then we remind them why they spent 10,000 years locked away. But if it's not? She looked up at the sky, where her enhanced vision could already make out the approaching entity. If it's not, then maybe we can finally stop being guardians and start being something better. What's better than guardians? Teachers, Sarah said. Mediators, friends maybe. The universe is big enough for all of us if we're willing to share. As the entity approached Earth, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The old ones and the new guardians, ancient enemies preparing to speak as equals for the first time in cosmic history. Behind them, human children continued to play, casually manipulating the fundamental forces of reality while laughing at jokes only they understood. They were the future. Beings who had never known what it meant to be powerless, but who also remembered what it meant to be human. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, the stories that had started as warnings were quietly rewriting themselves into legends of hope. The age of gods hiding as mortals was over. The age of mortals choosing to be gods had begun, and the universe, vast and strange and full of impossible wonders, had never been safer or more exciting than it was in the hands of the species that had learned to dream before they learned to fly, and who remembered their dreams even after they touched the stars. The end.